and I think this worked. I think we are live. That was the second attempt. Sometimes with Streamlabs you have to start twice. Welcome everyone. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Are we all good? We've got 1 minute before to officially start the tour. Amazing, perfect, Tish. Welcome everyone that I did not greet already in the chat. And welcome everyone that's new to me as well. If you happen to be new, you're very welcome. So I'll just give it a minute before to officially get started. Good, good, thank you, Dawn. Okay, perfect. Let me show you a little glimpse of the view. Hi Michelle, welcome Jerry, nice to have you here guys. So we've got 1 minute before to officially start. Oh, perfect, good, good. And it's officially time to go. So welcome everyone, welcome to YouTube. Just a bit of housekeeping before we go. You've got the chat, feel free to use it, ask me any questions you might have. So we are live. If you want to make sure you are live, you should see at the bottom of the screen a red line. If you see a little bit of gray at the end, you might be a couple of minutes delayed. So it might be a bit awkward in the chat because you might see comments referring to stuff that have not happened yet. So if you want to make sure you are live and not a little bit behind, you want to check that red bar that there's no gray at all. And it should also say live somewhere. If you are live, it's a little red dot. If it's gray, you might be a few minutes behind. So that's always a good idea to check that, because sometimes people might pause the stream and get back to it, or sometimes it starts a bit delayed. So make sure you check that to be all caught up before to chat. And for the ones that don't know me, I'm Nathalie, I'm a London tour guide. A lot of you know me from Heygo, of course, but you know, it's a all new platform on YouTube, so hopefully we'll have some new audience as well. And let's go. So let me flip this camera around. So we are here in Waterloo, in a little graveyard. This is now a park, but it used to be a graveyard. And guess who's buried here? Eliza Grimwood. Some of you might have heard about Eliza Grimwood in my Dark Tales of Waterloo tour. She was a murder victim as well. Actually, before the Jack the Ripper murder, or murders I should say, Eliza Grimwood was probably the biggest murder mystery in London at the time. I'll redo a live about her quite soon. But today we're not here to talk about Eliza. I'm here to tell you about the life of Polly Nichols, the first of the 5 canonical Ripper victims. And before to start, I'd like to give a little bit of credit really to Hallie Rubenthal. She's the lady that did a tremendous amount of research on the lives of the victims of the Ripper. And I just wanted to give her a bit of credit because today the vast majority of my information about the victims comes straight from her book, The 5, so I highly recommend it. It's not about the Ripper murders, it's about the life of the victims. So that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. So Polly, she was born Mary Ann Nichols, and she lived on Fleet Street. Well, just off Fleet Street. So Fleet Street, you might have heard of it. Well, we might have been together in some of my live streaming. That was the street of the ink. That was the street of the press. Most of the newspapers had their head offices on Fleet Street. And we're not going there today. I decided to start the tour here. In all those tours about the Ripper victims, I'm gonna do the tours in places connected to their lives, but you know, no one can resume their life story in one little district. But yeah, so that's why I've chosen Waterloo, because she's lived here at some point. And this area we're stepping into now, it is that's a noisy bicycle. it is a bit of like a time capsule, really. It's amazing. It's like stepping back in time, because that street here, Rupert Street, and the streets next to it, it's pretty much exactly as it would have been when it was created. So we're talking 1828. So amazing street. And whenever Polly walked that street to go towards Waterloo, maybe, she would have seen it pretty much exactly like it is today. Apart from a few antennas maybe on the top of the houses, and a few cars, of course, and maybe a few property sales signs, but everything else has stayed exactly the same. The street itself was developed by John Ruppel. That's why it's called Ruppel Street. And that's little cottages from workers at the time. So that's quite amazing, because we often see some amazing wealthy Victorian and Georgian buildings. This is Georgian. But it's actually a bit rarer to have accommodations that would be, the working classes. And it's amazing that it has survived despite the Blitz, despite all what could have destroyed it. So yeah, it's been used as a filming location for quite a few movies and documentaries, including James Bond, EastEnders, called The Midwife, the film about the Cray brothers as well, recently, and many documentaries as well. So beautiful street, and I'm pretty sure Polly would have walked that street a few times, because she lived at some point. She lived quite close. But at the moment, so she still lives on Fleet Street as a kid. She had an older brother and a little brother as well. She was the daughter of a blacksmith, so that was a skilled job. So, Daddy had an income. They were poor, but they were not the poorest of society, They did live in a slum just off Fleet Street. It was, it was quite often the case for poor working class families to live all together, cramped into 1 or 2 rooms. And there was no, sanity was quite bad. There was no cesspit or no sewage system. So often the content of the chamber pots would be dropped through the windows. It's easy to imagine her walking the street as a child. Yeah. And so she actually arrived here when she was an adult, but she could have come here as a child as well, because Fleet Street is just across the river. And so she lived with her family, but when she was 7 years old, very sadly, her mum passed away of tuberculosis. That was a great Victorian killer. At the time they would have called it consumption. The pub was already there at the time, the King's Arm. Consumption, by the way, if you are a native speaker, it's probably a bit more obvious to you, but to me it's not. When I started reading about Victorian times, I was a bit confused, because I was like, okay, the first person I read about dying of consumption, I was like, okay, is that an overdose, And then another one, I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of people overdosing in Victorian times, And then the next one was a child, and I was like, no, there must be something wrong here. Clearly the child is not ODing, And then I looked it up. I didn't realize it was tuberculosis. They called it consumption because it would, the disease would consume you. Yeah, exactly. And so it's a respiratory disease. And very sadly, all those families living very close together in small little rooms, it was quite easy to contaminate one another. And very sadly, Polly's mum had already contaminated our little brother that died a few months later. So Polly ended up alone with her dad and her older brother, which, to an extent, it's as sad as it is, it also gave them a little bit more money. You know, Daddy had only two mouths to feed. So for Polly, that meant that she was able to stay in school a little bit longer than average at the time. Oh, your uncle had consumption. Oh, and she stayed in school till the age of 15. Because she lived on Fleet Street, the street of the ink, that's, well, just off Fleet Street, people were very well aware down there of the importance of literacy. Girls were not often taught how to spell properly, but Polly would have been taught how to read. That street here is now called Teed Street, but back in the days it used to be called, so the streets next to Ruppel Street were named after the family of John Ruppel. So you had Catherine Street, she was his wife, you had David or whatever, the kids, and eventually it was a nightmare for the mail guys, because the postmen, because there were too many Catherine Street or whatever, so they've been renamed, all of them apart from Ruppel Street. And while we're here, let me show you a little hidden gem. Can you see it? Let me zoom in. I'll have to close the chat to zoom in. You might have seen that in my tour of Chiswick last time. That's a fire insurance plaque. So back in the days, after the Great Fire of London, people were really worried that their building might burn, and we started to have those private insurance companies. And that's what you'd put on your building to show that it was indeed insured. So if a fire broke out, the fire brigade, the independent companies would run to see the fire. They'll check if you have a little plaque. If you did, they'll help you. If you did not, they'll watch it burn, or they'll just go away. It was that bad. And after the Great Fire of Southwark in the 1860s, so not far from here, they realized that there was a need for an actual public fire brigade. So that's how we had the fire brigade we have today. The Sun, I think that's the oldest insurance company in the world. It's called the Sun Alliance today, but it still exists. And actually here on Ruppel Street in 1829, they had a fire. The buildings were not yet insured because they were still building them. It's the workers actually that might have started the fire. So that's why we've got quite a few of those plaques on Ruppel Street still. Anyway, let's get back to Polly. So she met a young man called William Nichols when she was 18. They married at St. Bride's on the other side of the river. I'll show you we might see the top of the church once we reach the riverside. William was the son of a heraldic painter. His dad used to paint the armories on the horse carriages. And then William himself was into printing. The family was poor. They moved a couple of times. They moved to Holborn, and then they moved to Trafalgar Street, which is right next to me. I actually cycle past where she would have lived every morning. Catherine Eddowes as well. Every morning when I have to start a tour at the Tower of London, I cycle past both of their places where they lived at some point. So I think of them quite a lot. Anyway, they moved down there, and eventually they had an amazing opportunity. In 1862, there's an American millionaire. He used to be in trade. He used to sell dry goods. He's originally from Massachusetts, and he became a banker. His name is George Peabody. He made a fortune, and we call him the father of philanthropy. He started to help, and because he did not have an heir, he was very rich, but never flamboyant. He never had a valet or anything like that. And he decided to help his adopted city of London. So he gifted, apologies, I don't know the exact figure because I keep finding different sources in different, but we're talking £500,000 at the time. So according to the Peabody Foundation, it's 33 million pounds in today's money, but I keep finding different figures. So an amazing amount of money to create the Peabody buildings, and that's one of them right here. It's not the one in which Polly lived. She actually, hers was maybe 500 yards down, but I think it might have been destroyed. So I'll show you this one instead. So the Peabody buildings, this one is from the 1870s, I think. Yes, it's open. Amazing. So they were for the poor, not the extremely poor. You'd have to be able to pay a rent, but a rent that was affordable. And you'd have to, no one could be rejected for any religion or any political views or anything. And then you could have a flat for them. It was extreme luxury. Yeah? Those flats are really small. I have a friend of mine that lives in one of those original Peabody buildings, not the original, but 1880s. It is very small, but it's decent. You can see that his living room was built to be like a bedroom. You could have it as a parlor if you wanted to, but yeah. So her and her husband, William, at that point they had 4 kids. They were lucky enough to move into one of those buildings. They had a toilet, which was amazing. Not just for them, they had to share with the neighbor. The neighbor, she was a lady called Rosetta. She was married, but her husband was a cook on a ship. He was never there. And very sadly, Rosetta and William started to have an affair. We don't know exactly when the affair started, but that's probably what pushed Polly into drinking, really. And to live in a Peabody accommodation, you'd have to be of good morals. You'd have to, it was very strict, no alcoholism. You had to be married, you couldn't live in sin. So if she had got caught being drunk, the family would have been evicted. We don't quite know what happened. According to William Nichols, it's because of her drinking that the relationship started to sour. According to, the victims, they never have a voice, so we don't know what really pushed Polly to walk out, but she left her family. She walked out, which is very unusual for a Victorian mother. She left her kids behind. Now, by the way, there was a murder here in this Peabody estate. I just waited to be outside to tell you, because I don't think anyone wants to know about a murder in their home if they don't know about it yet. Well, I say a murder, a manslaughter. In 1950, there was two chaps. They went to the pub. They had a drink. Well, a drink. No, they had quite a few drinks, and they were extremely intoxicated, the both of them. One was called William Donaghu and his mate Thomas. And William invited Thomas to sleep at his place because they were really drunk. So he gave Thomas his bed and he himself slept on the sofa. And in the middle of the night, he wakes up, William, and he realized that, he had to pee. He had to empty his beer in the toilet. So he went to pee and then he went back to his bed. And he found a dummy in his bed, a dummy that looked like his mate Thomas. And Thomas was, Thomas was a practical joker. He would always make jokes. So he stabbed the dummy. Why would you stab a dummy? I don't know. But he stabbed the dummy. And he got rid of the body. He just got it out of his front door. I don't know if it's that building there, but it's in that estate. And of course, in the morning, the neighbors they spotted the dead body. And William, when William woke up, he was ever so sorry. And of course, the police doubted his excuse. How can you actually believe? How can you be that drunk to believe that there's a dummy that looks like your mate in your bed, But would you believe they actually put it down as manslaughter? So they did eventually believe him. But yeah, and this is Hatfield Green here. It's called Hatfield because of the hats that they used to dry, not the hats themselves, but islands. the leather, you know, the dead skin, animal skin that they used to dry to make hats. We're quite close to Bermondsey. Bermondsey was known to be the spot for leather. So this is still the Peabody estate, all those buildings behind the tree. There's another one, another Peabody estate, a bit further down. If I was going to go straight down on the right for about 5 minutes, there's another one that was also the site of a horrible murder a few years ago in 2016. The British audience, you might remember that. It was a chap, an Italian guy called Stefano Brizzi. He basically ate a police officer. I mean, you've heard this right. He baked him. Horrible, horrible case, and really, really sad, because I actually believe the murderer was a good guy. It's drugs, you know, drugs, crystal meth. He actually copied the technique that he saw in Breaking Bad, you know, the show. A really horrible case, but it was a grinder sex party. Long, you know, I don't want to go into details because it's really shocking, but yeah. But it's really sad, because I actually had a friend of mine that had problems with the same drug, and they were going to the same crystal meth anonymous talk center in Soho. So, you know, it's really crazy what drugs can make you do, you know. But anyway, so let's go back to Polly. So she left her family and she walked out, and she had to go straight into the workhouse, really. She went to the Lambeth workhouse. We'll actually see the building tomorrow in my I'm doing a tour about the Lambeth poisoner tomorrow, so we'll see the workhouse. The workhouses, for the ones that don't know, they were those accommodation for the very, very poor. The parish would take care of them. Well, it was not a nice place to be. They'll give you a bed, a wooden box looking very much like a coffin, and then you'd have to work very, very hard the next day. They'll split the families open. But they wanted to make sure that they only helped the people that were destitute, that had to be helped. So they were called the Poor Law Guardians. They actually tried to help Polly. They tried to help her get a pension from her husband William, because it was the duty of the husband to supply for his wife. Divorce was not an option. The divorce was actually allowed since, I think it was 1857, but for the working classes it was impossible. It was just way too expensive, and the dynamic between men and women at the time was extremely unfair. For a lady to get a divorce, it was mission impossible. For a gentleman could get a divorce for adultery, but not the other way around. A wife could not get a divorce for adultery alone, unless there was another offense like cruelty or bestiality. So she couldn't have got a divorce anyway if William was having an affair with the neighbor Rosetta, unless he was also raping the dog. But that was not the case. So anyway, we are now on Stamford Street. I'm gonna cross over, so bear with me. Tomorrow night, actually, we'll talk about that street, because one of the murders we'll cover tomorrow about the Lambeth poisoner was committed right here. 118 Stamford Street. Anyway, so Polly was actually helped by the Poor Law Guardians to get a pension from William, and she won. So they had investigated. So sorry. Yeah. Nathalie Kerio, Keirrio. New followers. So they would have investigated. So at that point, if she was as drunk as William actually claimed, she would not have been helped by the poor law guardian. So she probably was already an alcoholic, but probably not that bad at the time. So they agreed to that William had to give her 5 shillings a week. Wait, I think some people are still on the police officer story. Guys, it's a really gruesome story. They found some traces of the police officer on chopstick, on a chopping board, in the oven. So you might understand why I don't want to go too much into details, but if you wanted to look up that story, it's the case of Stefano Brizzi. Stefano Brizzi, Italian name. Anyway, back I don't even know why I told you about that case. It just came up in the conversation. So Polly was oh, let me cross again. She was due a pension, 5 shillings a week. To live on 5 shillings a week, it would have been hard, but it would be possible. To give you an idea, a room in a slum would cost you 4 shillings. So then she'd have maybe 1 shilling for candles and soap and you know, it would be really hard, and she would have had to find a job, but it would have been possible. The thing is, you know, obviously she already had a bit of an issue with alcohol, and a lady alone at the time was almost inconceivable, you know. You kind of had to find yourself a male protector because it was just really hard to be a single or divorced lady. We think that at that point she met a man called George. According to the census, she was living in Holloway for a while with a George. Mary Ann Nichols is registered as doing laundry work, and George as a scavenger. A scavenger, it's a horrible job. It's if there was a pyramid of all the jobs in society, the scavenger would be right at the bottom. A scavenger was picking up stuff. It could be bone picking, or copper, or it could be worse. Some people were collecting poo. They were called the pure finders, collecting animal poo for the tanning industry behind me in Bermondsey. Or the worst one could be a tosher. A tosher, they would go down to the sewage to look for anything, any coins or anything. You could even look into the river for dead bodies. That would also bring in a bit of money, because you could take their rags or their jackets, empty their pockets, and then bringing the body to the morgue, they'll also give you a bit of money. So horrible job. And at the time, there were a lot of ads in the newspapers for private investigators. And because if William could have proven that Polly was indeed with another man, then he wouldn't have to pay the pension anymore. Let me zoom in a bit. There's not much to see, but behind the scaffolding there, you can see a bit of a church spire. That is the top of St. Bride's. That's where they married. Into the church, there's actually a little plaque to Polly Nichols, remembering her life more than her tragic death. So I think that's really cute. So Fleet Street is just there on the other side of the street. And so William actually hired one of those private investigators to check on Polly. And apparently he found some evidence that she was with a man. So William stopped paying the pension. In his defense, you know, he had a family to care for. He had now 5 kids of his own, plus one with Rosetta, the neighbor, and she had 2. So he had 8 kids, you know. And he had to move out of the Peabody building because he was dating Rosetta. They were not married. They could never marry because they were both married to somebody else. So that's how Polly ended up on the streets again. She probably was no longer with that George, because otherwise she wouldn't be on the street. And she went back to the workhouse or the casual wards. The casual wards were those, it was at the workhouse, it was a different wing, but that was usually for just a couple of nights. And Eventually, they found her a job into service, but that did not go down very well, so she went back on the street. Then at that point, we think she ended up with a widower. She probably found herself quite happy to be with a widower because, you know, she could have a place in you know, with kids as well, taking care of them. Like, you know, that's a Victorian lady, that was their life, you know, to be a good wife, to be a good mother. Suddenly, if you failed all that, you were nothing, you know, you were just a fallen woman. But that did not go down well with the widower, probably because they could never marry. And he ended up marrying another lady that was free to marry, you know. And she ended up back on the streets, sleeping rough in Trafalgar Square. When she got arrested for tramping and begging, they forced her back into the workhouse. And well, that's about that point that our brother had a terrible accident. You know, the Victorian homes, they were extremely dangerous. They were full of secret killers, you know. And he was in the kitchen trying to extinguish you know, those gas lamps, not gas, oil lamps, and his hair took fire, and he died in Guy's Hospital a few hours later. So that probably pushed Polly even closer to the bottle. You can see the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral in the distance there. And so she was back at the workhouse, and they found her a job in service again. There were some people that were, oh, we have a drone there. Let's say hello. They might be on YouTube as well. Double YouTube. And she found a job into service with a couple in Clapham that were teetotalers. So she suddenly had a room. They gave her some items of clothing. So, because you know, when you have a servant, she has to look nice. You know, she cannot look all dressed in rags and stuff. And the lady in the household probably pushed Polly to write a letter to her dad, because she did write a letter. She said she was fine. She was fine. The couple was lovely. They were teetotalers, so they were getting on. A very religious couple. So that's what she wrote. She probably actually felt very lonely. There was no other servants to chat with. And, you know, she probably had this sense of shame from day one, you know, to have left her family behind. Why did she do that at the first place? We can only guess. But she might have tried to protect them, because she probably knew that they might be kicked out if she was found out as an alcoholic. It could have been because her husband was with the neighbor already. It could have been, but many reasons. But that shame would have been with her all those many years. And eventually, she left. She stole the items of clothing that the couple had given her, and she escaped. That's how she ended up in Whitechapel. She had a bit of money, because, you know, items of clothing were much more expensive at the time than they are today. And that allowed her to, well, probably have a few drinks, and also to stay for 2 weeks in a doss house. So those were the accommodation for the very poor. A doss house for ladies only. So, you know, people have claimed that Polly was in the sex trade. It is possible, but, you know, there's absolutely no evidence that point towards that direction. First, if she was indeed selling her body, she might have had a bit more money to survive. She wouldn't have been tramping on the street that often. And also, well, she would have stayed in a mixed lodging house, so she could have maybe brought some gentlemen home and stuff like that. So I'm not telling you she was definitely not a prostitute. And even if she was, would that make her any less human? I don't think so. Would that justify, you know, the right of the rapper to attack her? Definitely not. Oh, we've got some people doing sandcastles. The Thames River is tidal. It goes up and down following the sea levels. We can actually go down on the beach if you want to wrap up the tour on the beach. So she stayed about 2 weeks in that lodging house. She made a friend, actually, a lady called Helen Holland. Helen, she's the one that witnessed the last few weeks of her life. They developed some kind of strong bond. Sometimes they would share a double bed to share the cost. And according to Helen, Polly was not selling her body, or at least she did not know anything about that. And well, eventually she ran out of money. She had sold all the items of clothing she could sell, and she ended up back in the streets again. That very night in 1888, she tried to go back to the Dust house with no money. The big boss said no. You know, you couldn't let any drunken lady come back and sleep for free, you know. And because she was drunk, she clearly had the money for the drinks. A night in a Dust house was about the same price as a pint of gin. Yes, I'm glad she found a friend as well, Janie. How did she get her money? Did she beg for her money? Did she sell her body? Did she? We don't know. We can only speculate. But so that night, she actually ran into Helen. Helen spotted her very, very drunk. But Polly famously said that night, "Don't worry. Look at my jolly bonnet. I'll soon get my dust money." That very sentence has been used to claim that Polly was indeed selling her body, that she was gonna go and find a customer because of her jolly bonnet, and that she would then get the 4 penny for a lodging house. We don't know what she meant when she said that. She could have meant, "Look at my jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go and sell it." She could have meant, "Look at my jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go and beg, and because I'm cute, they'll give me money." We just don't know. What we do know is that, well, a couple of hours later, her body was found brutally attacked on the streets of Whitechapel. And then that very minute, her story was no longer her own. Her story was all over the newspaper. Imagine for the family, not only, you know, your mother, your daughter, your sister, well, she didn't have any siblings anymore, but not only your loved ones is brutally attacked, but all over the newspaper, they're saying she was a prostitute, when it was probably not the case. And even if she was, you know, we tend to, there's actually a theory of some criminologists, they call it the less dead. You know, people that are victims, but because they are drug addicts or maybe people of color or sex workers, somehow they make the news, but not as, you know, it's like if somehow they were less dead. You know, a murder is a murder, you know, no one deserves to be killed. Let's go on the beach to wrap up the tour. You don't think she was a lady of the night? Yeah, well, me neither. But even if she was, you know what, I mean, she might have engaged in casual prostitution. You know, if you are unwell, you're freezing cold, you're standing in the rain in Trafalgar Square, and you have the opportunity to spend the night with a man in a warm bed. Who are we to judge, you know? In that case, yes, indeed, we could have said she was selling sex, but you know, did those ladies make any life choices that put them in the arm of the Ripper, or did life just happen? And you know, between men and women, the dynamics at the time were just so deeply unfair. you know, for a lady on the street, it was extremely hard to survive because there was, you know, the jobs they would do, they wouldn't bring much money at all. The men, they could go on queue at the docks to have some very physical labor for a day, and then they'll be able to afford a lodging house for the night. For ladies, it was just much harder. Oh, is it your birthday, Stephanie? Happy birthday. And that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me show you a last view of the river from the shore, from the beach area. And let me know if you have any questions for me before we go. If any of you took any nice postcards today, I hope some of you can share them on the live virtually Facebook group, because I know there's quite a few users that do not know yet how to take screenshots on YouTube. So if you were to share them, they might be able to download them and let me know if you have any questions. I'm gonna stay tuned for a few minutes because with YouTube I try not to connect too early because I'm a bit worried that, you know, some people might be new and they might be watching the replay later, and if I'm just there saying hello to people for 15 minutes, they might just close the video and go elsewhere, you know. So I prefer to do the catch up at the end. You took some of the streets, amazing. Yeah, Rupert Street is very, very beautiful. Well, thank you for choosing to spend your birthday with us, Stephanie. It's amazing to see that we've been able to kind of recreate at least part of this community elsewhere after Hego closing. And I don't see the tips on, you know, I don't have notifications for the tips, but anyone that left me a tip, thank you very much. You really very appreciated. For the ones that don't know how to leave a tip, I've pinned in the comment, I've pinned the link to my PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee, there's a minimum, it's £4, because that's the price of a fancy coffee in London. But if you wanted to go a little bit less, PayPal, I don't think there's any minimum on PayPal. And if you guys don't follow me yet, you might wanna subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's this way you've got more chances of seeing my tours on your feed. So if you wanna make sure you don't miss out on the fun next time. You banned from Facebook. What did you do, Stephanie? Did you flash your boobs? Well, Facebook can be a bit, sometimes they can ban people for nothing. Oh, thank you, Hedley. Thank you, Rosemary. Yeah, Facebook believed I was a spammer when I used to. Sometimes Janie was posting postcards of my tours and I would then post the link, and then Facebook would block me like if I was spamming, but it's my tour, it's my link. What am I spamming? So yeah, Facebook can be funny. Thank you, Sarah. On your birthday, yeah, not a good day to be banned. Cool. Let me know if you have any questions. And as you might have seen, YouTube is my platform of choice at the moment. So if any of you is still, I just don't want anyone to be left behind. You know, I want to make sure you guys are all comfortable with the platform. So if you do have any questions or stuff you don't understand about YouTube, feel free to ask on my Facebook group. I've got a Facebook group called Nathalie My Guide. Feel free to ask any questions you might have, because chances are some people might have the same struggle, so we can find a solution together. Right, let me show you the view again. Because the light is changing. I could go mudlarking, looking for treasures in the Tam. Did Leonie mention getting together for another tour? Well, it's not planned yet, but we will eventually one day. I should see her on Saturday. She might be coming down to London to see the coronation. Well, we're not going into the church, but hopefully they'll have big screens in Hyde Park. That's where I watched Her Majesty's funeral as well. So we might go down there. I don't really want to go into the crowns, but I do want to see. I think it'll be a shame to live in London and miss the event. The coronation, it's going to be interesting. It's like a wedding. It's like a wedding between Charles and the country, He's going to have a coronation ring and everything. So it's like going to a very public wedding. Live stream, Emily, no. It's going to be so busy. There's no way I can have a signal. I don't think so. If there's anything exciting happening, I can probably do a quick video or anything like that. But those events that get very busy, then the signal drops down. Yeah. Yeah, I shouldn't tell Camilla. Well, I think she knows. But yeah. You love the guides meetup? Well, same for you guys. If you do come to London, don't be a stranger. We can organize a little meetup, and we've had some Voyagers meetup in the past, and they were very fun. First time here, Debbie. Well, glad you found us. I think there's still quite a few people that have not found us yet, so hopefully, I hope eventually one day most of the Hego audience will find us on YouTube, and I hope it might grow. I hope some more might join, and that'll be quite cool. Yeah, exactly. There'll be so many channels. You're right, Pauline. Amazing, proper TV program covering the event. So I don't think little streamers would be the most interesting to watch. You were there during the Jubilee. Yeah, it does get very, very busy through the royal events. Are you coming to London? Good. Let us know, Janie. Right, I don't see any more questions or anything, so I'm gonna get going. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you for supporting me into that transition into a new platform, and with my commentary. Well, one day I might be doing the commentary on the BBC. Who knows? And tomorrow night I'm redoing the Lambeth Poisoner. So we'll be quite close to here actually. We'll talk about Thomas Neal Cream. So if you're free tomorrow night, it's about the same time, I think it's 8:30. Make sure you join us. If you're not free, that's fine. You'll find it on replay as well on YouTube. And I might try to go back to West Norwood as well this week, because I think it might still be a bit of a cherry blossom in the cemetery. So that'll be a good time to redo it. I'll let you know. Anyway, have a good morning, or a good evening, a good night, a good lunch, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And thank you for being here, supporting us. Have a good one. See you later. Off to a show, the Polish